Thanks for sticking with us on this rather lengthy couple of videos, but it's important to get everything correct and get the best quality out of your photo book. And in this part 3, we put everything together and upload the software onto the book printer's website. So let's get onto part 3. So let's have a look at how we create a template from scratch. Working in Photoshop, we would go to File, New, and if you've already made and saved a preset, you may well have one. If not, let's say, well, I've got an A4 landscape that I previously made at 360 DPI, which is not quite right, but you'll see here we wanted 297 and 210 for the dimensions of A4 paper. We wanted it 300 pixels per inch, and because this is going to be sent to the book publisher, we can't use 16-bit, it has to be an 8-bit file, and the color profile is not ProPhoto, it's going to be Satanic RGB, the smallest color space available, and so we can save that. And let's say that I'll call this A4 book page. We know the dimensions already, 300 ppi sRGB, and I know then in future if I want to use this template, away we go. So now I have a page that is, let's just check it by going to image size 297 by 210. For some reason Photoshop seems to fiddle around with these dimensions marginally, but it's close enough to being exact. We have a resolution of 300 pixels per inch, and also if we look at the let's just look at the convert to profile options, it's already sRGB. We don't need to do anything. We'll cancel out of that. So this page is now at the size, the resolution and the right color space for our images. Now let's assume we're going to make this into the title page of the book, and we can now apply some text effects to this. Now you might want to decide, well, I want some margins here, and my title page is actually going to be the first page we see when we get into the book and we open it up, so therefore the binding is going to be on the left, so I'm going to drag in a margin there or a border there. I'm going to drag one down from the top, and it's going to be, let's just be consistent, we'll keep them at 15 millimeters each time. Now at the bottom we're down at 210, so I need to come back to 195 to keep it at the distance from the edge, and on this edge 297 is the size of the book, and if I want to take off 15 from that, I make it 287, no, .282 plus 15 is 297, if my maths are correct. So this complies with our basic layout for a book. Now with text, Photoshop is brilliant at making text, and you have a tool here called the text tool, and by default it will come up with some silly looking text, which is just a bit of Latin, and all you need to do here is type in the title you want. And having done that, if you then use your selection tool to select the text, we can do things like change the font size, whether it's regular, bold or italic. Now I wouldn't use bold and italic on this. I think regular is fine for this book on Iceland. And once you've typed the text, you can of course move it around, and Photoshop very nicely gives you some alignment tools to position it. Now in the case of this book, I want to do something a little bit tricky. I want to increase the spacing between the letters. So if I now go back, double click on the T in the text box to select all of that text, and we can use the text or character tools to vary the spacing. Now at the moment this text would be normally spaced at 0 spacing, which is the default spacing, but we can start to play around with the text spacing. Let's just say we want to space the text out. The letters themselves don't change, but the spacing between them changes. And we can also play around with things like the height and the space between lines, all within this character setting. And if in Photoshop you're not seeing the character tools, all you need to do here is go up to the view, the window panel, and just come down and select the options you want. And we want the character tools, and there we are. And I just dock them into that folder there. So with things like making text, you can then play around with these and move them around to your heart's content. And if we wanted to get to things like the title page here, I've dropped the text in, not that one, I've made the text in a Photoshop file which I've dropped in here, and we'll open that and I'll show you how to make semi-transparent text. So now we'll have a look at making the semi-transparent text which we need to go and do in Photoshop. And here's the image I used to make that cover selection for the book, and you'll see here that I've got a couple of text layers. I've started with the original image which I've already processed, and the first thing I've done here is I've created a text layer, and what we can do there is we can do some interesting effects with the text. And what I've done here is I've created the text and I've typed it in, and I've used white, and I'll show you how we do that. Let's just go together to make a new text layer, and I'll just use the left hand justification, and we'll just do the same text. And with that selected, we better make that a little bit bigger. If you don't see enough point size here, the biggest it goes to 72. You can just type in the size you want, except it didn't like that. Let's go again, 200. There we go, point size 200. Now you'll see now that the text currently is in black. If I double click on the text Iceland, and you'll see up in the top panel here, this is the text color. I click on that box, it's currently on black. I want it to be white. I'll just drag that up there, and now it's white. And we've now got our text, and what I want to do is I want to do two things. I want to add a small stroke around the outside edge, that little black line, and I also want to do a drop shadow. So with that text layer selected, I right mouse click on the layer, and we'll go up to the blending options panel, and here we have a number of options. And firstly, we're going to do a stroke on the text, and we can see we can vary the size of that, and we can have it on the outside, inside, or center of the text. I want it on the outside. I don't want that big, I just want it about 4 or 5 points, and you'll see here that I now have a nice little black line around the edge. And the other thing I want to do is I want to put a drop shadow against that so that the text looks as though it's actually floating above the photograph. And we've got some various controls here. We can have how far it floats away, the spread of the shadow, and the size of the shadow, and you can adjust the angle at which. Normally about a 45-degree angle from the top left to the bottom right is about the right way to go. Having done that, we can click OK. Now the interesting part is to make this semi-transparent as I have here. And you may have wondered, looking at your layers panel, what this funny little box here called fill is all about. We have opacity, and we can change the opacity, and we can vary the opacity of the text. But what about the fill? Well, the fill is the important part here. If we go and reduce the fill on this layer, gradually getting that down, you'll see that then the text has become mostly transparent, and all we have left is the black outline and the drop shadow. And by playing around with the amount of fill we have in our text, we can come up with a nice looking semi-transparent text. Now that's the one I just made. I'll delete that, and we're back to our original image. And the beauty of this is that once you've set up those parameters, it doesn't matter where you move it. The shadow and the stroke on the text is still going to stay there, and you can move it around until you're happy with the result. And the same thing goes for the titles. I've done a stroke and a drop shadow on that as well, and that helps to give it a little bit of definition. So with that image made with the text, we'll save that image with the text on it, and then we drop it into, where are we, onto the page, and that's the bit we're going to look at next. So now that we've had a look at how to make the text and the title pages, the next most important thing to do is to create each page for the book. And to do that, we need to go firstly back to Lightroom and look at our book layout. Now we've already made our cover page, we'll leave that for the moment, and our title page. Let's have a look at the first page of the book we're going to use. So we know that that is page 1, there's a blank page 2, what we're going to be creating is page 3, and I need to now go to my library and pick this photo up so that we can now edit and create the actual page. And by clicking on this part here, you'll see that it highlights this image here. And so now if I right mouse click on that and say edit in Photoshop, the image will be opened, and of course if you have an image that's been processed, you always want to open the original into Photoshop, and then we will drop it onto our page. But there's a couple of steps we have to follow to keep the quality at optimum. So we now have our file opened. You'll see it's an image that's been processed, and we're going to drop it onto our page template, which is this one we created and saved earlier. So going back to our photograph, there's a few steps we have to go through to make this work and to maintain the quality. The first thing we do is we want to flatten the image, because we're going to use the completed image in the book. So we flatten the image, all one layer, and now we want to size the image and put it at the correct DPI to go into the book. And looking at our page template, I've worked out that the size of my image that I want to fit within these guidelines is 257 millimeters wide. You can work that out by calculating the margins. So going back to our flattened image, the first thing we do is we go to image, size, and we make that 257. And oh no, we don't want 360. We know the book is going to be 300 pixels per inch, and so we've now sized that page. And in doing so, when we resize that image, let's just look at that again, we're going to resample that image to maintain the quality. It's already at the right size. The next thing we want to do is we want to convert it to the correct color space. If you're editing your photographs to print at home, you'll probably keep them in 16-bit ProPhoto RGB color space. We now want to change that. We want to make it into the sRGB color space. You'll see our source space is ProPhoto RGB, and we're going to convert it to sRGB. So we'll do that now, and now we have the image at the right size, the right pixels per inch, and the right color space. And now all we do is get our move tool at the top left, click on the image and hold, drag it up, hover onto that A4 template, don't let go yet, drag it onto this page and release it. And now it's on the page, and with that move tool we can drag it around, and you'll see that it will snap into the right position. And you might think, oh well, why can't I just drag that photograph on here and resize it to suit? Well, I've tested that, and you lose quality, because when you just resize the image using the transform tool, you lose quality because it just deletes pixels, it doesn't resample the image. So I've dropped my completed image onto the page, and I've already created a text layer. Now, for instance, I know which page or which photograph number this is going to be, and I've already set this up as a sample one. I just double click on that now, and I can I've called each of these ones a plate in the text in the book, so I'll call this plate whatever it is. Let's say it's 5, and it was certain waterfall in Iceland, and you can fill in a little bit of text. Once that's done, just click that off to select it and lock that in. And now what we do is we save this page, and bearing in mind that we know that the book publisher wants the page in a certain format. It'll usually be JPEG or PNG, or in some cases TIFF. So I'm now going to save this page as a completed page. So I'll call this file, save as, and I'm going to go to the folder where I'm saving my Iceland book pages. But I'm changing my file format from Photoshop format to PNG in this case, and you'll see now I've already done this work and it's called plate number 2, and I'll save that as PNG. I'm not going to do that, but let's go back and open up that page, Iceland book pages. Plate number 2 is the one I saved earlier, and here's my completed page, and there it is, all laid out and perfect for the book. One other important thing to remember is when we're looking at text, for a lot of the Iceland book pages, some of the names had the unique Icelandic characters in them, and using the text tools within the bookmaking software, you probably won't be able to use those special fonts. And by using Photoshop, it does recognize all of those special fonts, and you can add them into the image and save it without any problem. So there is my page saved, and you'll see it's called plate 2, and we're ready to go and lock it into the book. Now, one last thing we can do once we've completed our page is something I mentioned briefly in part 1, and that is to have a look at how the page will look when printed. And having completed this page and saved it, we can now go and do a bit of soft proofing, and we go up to View, Proof Setup, Custom, and then under the device to simulate, the paper profile for this particular book publisher is this one, which you would need to download from the ICC website, the International Colour Consortium, and it's called FOGRA 39. And once you've selected that, if you click on Simulate Paper Colour and Preview, you will see how the finished page will look, and you can see that there's a little bit of loss of tonality. The deep blacks have faded away a little bit, and some of the colour saturation has gone. So having seen that, what we can do now is we can make a little adjustment to this page to try and compensate for that. And we know we can't increase the blacks anymore because the paper can't hold any more black. But what we can do is we can slightly increase the contrast between the lightest tone and the darkest tone, and we do that with a curves adjustment. And if we even if we just went and picked the linear contrast slider, which gives us a very gentle contrast adjustment, an S curve, we can just manipulate that a little bit, and we can see before and after. It's a little bit too much on the image, but if we now go back into our proof setup, we can see how that will look when we're proofing that particular paper stock. And if we go back in, select the paper color, and then choose preview, yes, we can see that that actually does help a little bit over what it looked like before. So with that adjustment in place, cancel that out. This is what it was before. You can see one of the consequences of using a curves adjustment on any of the image editing software programs is that by increasing contrast you also increase saturation. Now the paper won't be able to handle most of that, but at least what we can do is we can just give it a little bit of a hand. And so with that adjustment in place, we would go back and go and file, save that page, and because it's in that PNG format, it will automatically flatten that image. So it already exists, we're going to replace it and save it with the best quality option. And so if I close that once it's done, and then just go back and reopen that page, you'll see that it's reopened and it's a flattened image, and it's had that little bit of increasing contrast applied. So that helps us optimize the quality of our pages once they're completed. And then what you would do from here on in is you would go back through and back to Lightroom and work through each of the other pages and repeat the process, bearing in mind that you have a left hand and a right hand page. And then once you've completed that, we'll move on to the next section. Now once we've been through the book layout and gone in and saved each of our images into the book format and saved them off into that folder that we created for our final pages, we're now not going to be working with this collection anymore. We'll go back to the library and we'll import that folder with all of the final pages into our Lightroom catalogue, and I've already done this, and so we can go and find it, and it's here, and I've called it Iceland Book Pages, and here within this new folder are all the templates that I saved, as well as all of the actual pages that I laid out. You'll see here book cover, PNG format. We've also got some other variants in Photoshop format. We've got my index pages, and we've got each of the other plate numbers. Now, having done that, what we would do is we want to select just the PNG format pages, and we'll put them into another book format so that we can proof them. So with our folder imported with all of our completed pages as well as our templates, we would go up to the metadata panel and just say we just want the PNG pages because they're the pages that I've saved that are going to be the actual book format. And with that PNG selected, I will just click on the first image and shift click onto the last image, and then I would add them into a new collection, which I would come down and just create a new collection, and I'll call that Iceland Book Final Pages, and they will automatically be added to it. Now I've already done that, so if we scroll down here now and look here, Iceland Book, I've brought all those actual pages in, and I can now go in and lay them out into a final book layout just to check that everything works. And what I've done is I've previously saved this, and I've got to create a final book layout. Now, doing this twice enables us to do the final proof before we send this off to be printed. And so if I double click, or if I select from the front, I can look at my front and back layout. I can then move on to each of my pages. That was deliberately left blank, and then I can scroll through into the first one, and that should be plate 1. Yes, it is. And then I can look at each of my pages as they're laid out finally in the book, bearing in mind that the blurb photo books here are in imperial sizes and they're not in the metric sizes, so the actual sizing on the page isn't going to be quite right. But what we're looking at here is I want to make sure I've got my left and right hand pages correct, I've got my text laid out correctly, and more importantly that the pages look correct when I compare them, that I've got the progress of the images and the matching up of images correct all the way through the book, and I'm happy with it. And the most important thing we do now before we go to the last step, which is uploading them into the book printer software, is to do a final proof, because it's so easy to put typos in, to miss pages, or to make other simple errors as we go through. So doing this again in a final book layout like this enables me to do a couple of things. Now we can just click through a few more of these and see how the pages look, and if I say I want to double check on that, I'll just click on the single book page. Yes, that looks fine, and you'll see here that there's some of the special text pages coming in here. So once we've done that, we can go back. We've got our final book. This is really how the book is going to look all the way through to the end. I haven't mentioned this previously, but I also put in a map with the location of all the photographs in here, and then index pages where there was a little more description of each photograph and the story behind them. Having done all that, now we want to do a final sanity check and a proof, and the way that we can do that is with this book selected, we can export the book as a PDF, and that allows us to really go through it minutely and check each page. So if I click on that to export it, I will save it back into the same folder where all the pages are for the book, and then we'll have a look at the PDF version and see how that looks. So then if I open my PDF viewing software, and we can just go in and find the right book, and it was under the Iceland book that I saved it. Iceland book final. You'll see here that I've got a front and back page, first page, blank page, Now, but I want to see the pages laid out side by side, and this allows me to do this if I go up into the view option, and if depending on your version of a PDF viewer, you should be able to see page display. You should be able to look at a 2-up page display so that you can see the two pages opposite each other, and then by clicking down the pages you can see this quite clearly. Now, a lot of the book printing software will allow you to create a draft, but they often have some text overlaid so you can't use it, and it becomes really difficult to use. So that what I suggest we do is we zoom right in, and we can go through and we can check the spelling, we can check every last detail as we go through the book. And this is our final sanity check before we commit to putting it into the book software and uploading it. And you'll see here, if I zoom in here, some of the special fonts that only apply to Icelandic language that we can add to in the book software using Photoshop. So the most important thing to do lastly is to do this proofing, make sure everything looks correct, and go through and double check. And if anything is wrong, you can go back and remake that page, make any changes, and then save it. And then we're ready to put it into the book printers software. So now we've created our book layout using Lightroom. We've made a PDF version to do our final proofing, to do a triple, absolute final check. We're now ready to go into the Bookmakers software package and add our pages and then upload it to their website for printing. So depending on the various Bookmakers software packages, they do vary a little bit, but overall they're fairly similar. So we're going to use this one as an example, and what we're going to do, we're going to create a new project and it will come up with a number of options. I'm going to create a photo book, standard collection, classic photo book is the standard version, and it will now ask me for the type or the size of the book. Now we've made all of our pages into A4, so that's the type of book we want, is we want an A4 page. And sometimes it'll come up and ask you, there's a wizard that will help lay out the book. No, we've already done our book layout, so we don't want to do that. And then you'll need to give your project a name, and I've made several versions of this, so I'm just going to call this Iceland number 5, and we'll go ahead and create that. It'll take a few seconds to generate the book layout, and once that's done we can start adding our photos. Now it's finished preparing the layout, and we've now got a book layout ready to add our pages. And what we need to do first is we need to tell the software where the pages are, and we need to go and select the folder that contains our pictures. And one reason why we saved all of our final pages into a separate folder is so that we can go and find them and easily import them into the software. And as we save this as another folder with the Iceland book pages in it, we just select that folder, and it will then load all the pages that are in the correct format for the book layout. And the first thing that we might do is we might lay the cover out, and by default it comes up with some standard sort of layouts. And what we'll do is we'll just add our book cover page on, and what we just need to do is to lock this page, scale it up to the full size of the book, which is handled by these little red lines. We've got our book cover, and I can go and now, if I want to, put my back page on, which I've also created, and again we just scale that up, lock it into the layout, and it doesn't matter that these bits overlap because they disappear into the binding. So we've got our front and back. We can then go into our first section. This is the inside of the cover of the book, and nothing goes there. And what we'll then do is we will add the title page, and doing this we can check that everything works correctly. That looks fine. The inside of the title page I decided to leave blank, and then what I would want to do is add my first photograph on the right hand side. And we can do this, and we can just lock this in, scale it down, and you'll say, oops, I've made a problem here, I've made it too big. That's fine. I just need to scale that back, and once it locks into those guides, you know that it's correct. And you'll see here that the width of this page has disappeared into the binding, and what I'm seeing is pretty much an even border all around. And I know that as I drop these pages in, if I see this effect, I know that I'm doing okay. So let's just go and find the next couple of plates, and for some reason they don't always seem to be coming in alphabetical order or numerical order, but that's okay. We can just scroll down and find them. And so this one was a left-hand page, and then I want number 3, which will be down here, page number 3. Drop that in, and because we've done all our proofing and our checking, this is really a fairly simple matter to just lay this out. And you can see again, I've checked that my left and right hand pages are correct. I've got plate number 2, plate number 3, and it's fine. We can go through and we can see that we can add the pages and end up with a completed book. So once we've gone through and we've added all of these pages, we've now got our completed book. Now I've already created one previously, so I'm going to go back and open the one that I already saved. So I'll do that now, and then we'll have a look at the final book. So now I've got open the layout that I completed previously and used to print the actual book, and you can scroll through and see all of the pages and check that everything looks correct, and this will give you a really good idea that everything is looking okay. The layouts are all looking fine, and you can go through and see that we were looking at a 60-page book, and here we are, page 58, 59, and page 60, the last page is blank, and that all works fine. These are my index pages that I created to show a little more information about each of the image. I have a map here with the locations of all of the photographs. You may or may not want to put something like that in, but basically the book is now ready to go. So we've already proofed it in our PDF version. We can now simply go to upload this image and place the order for the book, and then wait for it to come back to us. And to do that, it'll be added to the shopping cart or whatever system the book printer uses, and then you will make all your selections and upload the book and pay some money, and you'll very soon get a book back. That completes the process for putting the book together. I hope this has been really useful for you, because producing a photo book is a wonderful way to use your images and to make gifts for friends and family. So I hope you give it a try, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.